As we grow older, many of us begin to feel a shift in the way we think about ourselves, especially when it comes to topics like intimacy and self-care. In our younger years, we may feel encouraged to embrace our bodies, our desires, and the connections we form with others. However, as the years pass, society often places boundaries around these aspects of life, subtly suggesting that desire and intimacy are things to be left behind as we grow older. This shift in perspective is not necessarily a reflection of reality, but more a reflection of societal pressures. The truth is, our emotional needs and desires don't simply disappear with age. In fact, as we age, we may find that we still yearn for connection, pleasure, and even intimacy. But we might feel unsure about how to approach these desires or even feel embarrassed to acknowledge them. The stories of people like Donna Esperanza and Don Ancelo help shed light on this often overlooked aspect of aging. Both of them experienced a deep sense of self-discovery as they confronted their feelings and desires in later years. These stories encourage us to question the silence surrounding sexuality and self-care in old age, offering a refreshing and compassionate perspective. Donna Esperanza, embracing desire and self-compassion. Donna Esperanza's story begins at a time in her life when her children had grown up and left home. Her house, once filled with the sounds of family life, had become quiet. With her children building their own families, Donna found herself alone, reflecting on the changes in her life and body. She began to feel a sense of loss, not just of time or opportunity, but of herself. Her body, once full of energy, now seemed slower and different, and she began to question whether there was still room in her life for the feelings of desire and intimacy she had once known. For a while, Donna suppressed these thoughts, feeling embarrassed about the natural feelings that still arose. She asked herself, could a woman my age still feel attraction or desire? The concept of intimacy and physical pleasure seemed to be relegated to the past, an age when she was younger, more vibrant. But despite her best efforts to dismiss them, these feelings didn't go away. They remained, quietly but persistently. Donna took a step toward understanding her feelings when she spoke to her doctor. With great care, she expressed her concerns, unsure whether it was normal for someone in her 70s to still feel desire. Her doctor responded with kindness and reassurance, offering a perspective that Donna had not considered. She told Donna that sexuality does not have an expiration date, that it is a lifelong experience, and that desire can continue to play a meaningful role in our lives at any age. This insight became a turning point for Donna. Slowly, she began to explore these feelings, not as something to be ashamed of, but as a part of her ongoing journey. She began to reconnect with herself in new ways, learning that self-compassion and intimacy were not things to be feared or avoided. Donna discovered that acts of self-care, such as reconnecting with her body and her feelings of pleasure, became sources of empowerment rather than shame. As she allowed herself to embrace this aspect of her identity, she felt a sense of liberation and peace. Over time, Donna's anxiety, which had once plagued her, began to lessen. Her nights became calmer, and she started to see her body in a new light. The wrinkles, the lines that told the story of a life lived fully, were no longer symbols of loss but marks of strength and resilience. Through her journey of self-discovery, she found that self-acceptance was not about denying desire, but about embracing it with compassion and understanding. Don Ancelo, a gentle reaffirmation of life's desire. In a quiet village not far from Donna's home lived Don Ancelo, a man whose wisdom and humor had made him a beloved figure. Despite the years, Don Ancelo maintained a lively presence, always ready with a story that entertained and enlightened those around him. However, like Donna, he too was not immune to the societal pressures surrounding aging, especially when it came to the more personal aspects of life, such as intimacy. One day, as Don Ancelo sat with his old friend Sophia in the town plaza, he noticed a change in her. Sophia, whose face still held the vibrancy of youth despite the years, seemed preoccupied. a quiet hesitation marking her features. After a few moments of silence, Sophia finally spoke, her voice hesitant. She confessed that she had been struggling with her own feelings about intimacy and desire. The idea of needing or wanting such things at her age felt awkward, and she wondered if it was normal to still have such thoughts. Sophia's confession, though filled with uncertainty, was a moment of vulnerability, one that Don Ancelo understood deeply. He listened with compassion, placing a reassuring hand on hers. After a brief pause, he responded, his voice warm and understanding. "Sophia, you and I have both lived long enough to know that our hearts and bodies never stop feeling," he said gently. "The world might tell us that in our later years, we are meant to retreat from desires to fade quietly into the background, but I don't believe that's true. We still have the capacity to love, to long, to feel deeply." Don Ancelo's words were simple, yet they carried a profound message. That desire is not confined to any specific age. His response resonated with Sophia, helping her to see that her feelings were not strange or shameful, but a natural part of being human, no matter the number of years she had lived. The timelessness of desire, a universal truth. The stories of Donna Esperanza and Don Ancelo highlight a truth that is often overlooked, that desire, self-care, and intimacy are not bound by the years we've lived. These aspects of our human experience do not fade away. They evolve, adapting to our changing bodies and lives. What Donna and Don Ancelo teach us is that we don't have to deny these feelings because of age. In fact, embracing them can be a profound source of self-understanding, healing, and well-being. As Donna's experience shows, the journey to rediscover one's desires in later years is often a path of self-compassion. It requires courage to confront the societal expectations and self-doubt that may accompany aging, but the rewards are immense. By embracing the body's capacity for pleasure and connection, we can live with greater peace and acceptance. Don Ancelo's perspective offers an additional layer of insight: the importance of not allowing age to define our needs or desires. The ability to feel deeply, to seek connection, and to engage with the world through our emotions and bodies is a universal part of being human. It is not something that diminishes with time. Rather, it can deepen and transform as we grow older, a life well lived, embracing ourselves at every stage. Ultimately, both Donna and Don Ancelo show us that aging does not equate to letting go of the parts of ourselves that make us feel alive. The desires we hold, whether for intimacy, connection, or pleasure, are part of our ongoing journey and growth. These desires are not something to be ashamed of or hidden. They are natural expressions of our humanity. What matters most, as both of them have come to understand, is that we treat ourselves with kindness, with acceptance, and with the knowledge that desire is not a fleeting thing. It is a continuous thread that runs through our lives. Whether we are young or old, our bodies and hearts are deserving of respect, care, and love. By embracing our desires with dignity, we can live each day more fully, more authentically, and with a deeper appreciation for the people we are and the lives we lead. In the end, the lessons shared by Donna Esperanza and Don Ancelo are not only for those in their later years, they are for all of us. Regardless of our stage in life, we can all benefit from embracing our bodies, our needs, and our desires with compassion, understanding, and self-love. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all, to love and accept ourselves regardless of age. The conversation that changed everything. In the gentle warmth of the afternoon sun, the plaza was quiet. Only the soft murmur of a few scattered conversations filled the air. Don Ancelo, always a fixture in this small village, had found his usual spot, a weathered bench by the fountain where the birds often perched, and he sat there, his presence calm and comforting. Sophia, a longtime friend, joined him, though she appeared distracted, her face marked by an unmistakable sense of uncertainty. Her brow furrowed slightly, and her hands fidgeted with the edges of her shawl as she settled beside him. As the old man noticed her unease, he smiled gently, his eyes twinkling with the warmth of someone who had lived through enough of life to understand when others were holding something back. He sensed the tension in her body, knew the thoughts swirling in her mind, and was ready to meet them with the kind of wisdom that only time could offer. For years, Sophia had been carrying an invisible weight. She had recently entered her later years, and like many in her age group, she began to notice a certain shift in how she perceived herself, particularly when it came to intimacy, connection, and, most profoundly, the quiet longing for pleasure. These feelings were not new to her, but as she aged, they began to clash with the societal expectations that were so often placed upon people of her age. As she sat beside Don Ancelo, she was grappling with the fear that her desires were something to be ashamed of, something that should have been left behind with youth. But Don Ancelo, as always, was perceptive, and he waited patiently as she gathered the courage to speak. She didn't have to say much. Her body language said everything. "You're troubled, Sophia," he said with his characteristic softness, his voice carrying the weight of years of experience. "Is there something on your mind?" Sophia hesitated, and then with a deep sigh, she began to speak, her voice tentative at first. "I've been thinking about something," she said, glancing down at her hands, "about intimacy, about feeling desire, and, well, I don't know if it's appropriate at my age. I feel strange even thinking about it, let alone admitting it, but I can't help it. I still long for connection, for affection, and yet I feel like I'm not supposed to." Don Ancelo listened intently, his weathered face thoughtful. He had heard this hesitation in others before, this quiet fear that age had somehow robbed them of their right to desire, to feel, to be seen. It was a lie that society often told people as they grew older, that their physical and emotional needs were secondary, irrelevant, or even inappropriate. He paused, letting her words sink in. Then, with a slight twinkle in his eye, he responded, "Sophia, I want you to listen closely, because what I'm about to say is important. Masturbation, like many things in life, isn't about the age we are. It's about staying connected to ourselves, to our bodies. It's about recognizing that the need for intimacy, whether it's with another person or with ourselves, is a part of who we are, and that is nothing to be ashamed of." Sophia blinked in surprise. Her face softened as the weight of her embarrassment began to lift. Don Ancelo's words, candid and honest, offered her something she hadn't anticipated: comfort, validation. She wasn't alone in her feelings. She was not a relic of the past simply because she had grown older. There was no expiration date on the need for love, connection, or intimacy. With a gentle chuckle, Don Ancelo added, "In fact, Sophia, it's something to celebrate. We've all earned the right to continue living fully, to continue experiencing joy in whatever form that takes." Sophia's shoulders, which had been tense moments earlier, began to relax. She felt a deep sense of peace settle over her, as though Don Ancelo's words had somehow unlocked a door within her, a door she didn't even realize was there. She was learning, slowly, to accept this truth, that her body, her heart, and her desires were still hers to embrace. A story from the past, Don Ancelo's journey. Seeing the softening of Sophia's expression, Don Ancelo felt the moment was ripe to share something of his own. He leaned back slightly, settling into the comfort of the bench, his hands resting gently on his knees. There was a quiet pause before he spoke again, this time with more depth, his voice carrying the weight of his years. "Sophia," he began, his eyes not leaving hers, "I understand your concerns all too well. Society has ingrained in us this belief that sexuality is reserved for the young, that once we reach a certain age, we're no longer allowed to feel desire or seek pleasure. But the truth, my friend, is far more complex and beautiful than that. Sophia's curiosity piqued, and she leaned forward slightly, listening intently. She had known Don Anselo for many years, but she had never heard him speak like this before. His vulnerability and openness took her by surprise. She wasn't sure what to expect, but what came next was a story that would forever change the way she saw herself and the way she viewed the world. Don Anselo's eyes grew distant for a moment as he began to recount the past. A few years ago, after I lost my beloved wife, I was plunged into a deep loneliness. Our children had moved away, and while they visited when they could, most days I was alone with my thoughts. He paused, a shadow of grief passing over his face. The house, once filled with love and laughter, became quiet, and in that silence I started to reflect, not only on my emotional state, but also on my physical and intimate needs. I began to question whether I still had the right to feel desire, to want connection. Sophia listened closely, her heart aching for her friend. It was hard to imagine the loss he had endured, the years spent with someone who had meant so much to him. She could only imagine the silence that would have settled over him in the wake of such a loss. It was strange, Don Anselo continued, his voice steady but laced with vulnerability. I remembered conversations from my youth when we would talk about staying connected to oneself, even in the absence of a partner. But when the time came for me to live it, I found myself filled with shame. I was uncomfortable with the idea of needing something, of seeking intimacy and pleasure. The voice in my head told me that I was too old for such things, that I should be beyond it. Sophia could see the conflict in his eyes as he relived those early moments. She could hear the familiar tension in his voice, the same tension she had felt in her own heart. But then, one night, after a particularly long and lonely day, I made a decision. I decided to set aside my discomfort, to allow myself to explore a side of myself that I had long neglected. At first it felt awkward, even clumsy. I didn't know what I was doing or how it would make me feel. He paused, almost as if he were still processing the events in his mind. But little by little, as I let go of the guilt and the fear, I began to relax, and something incredible happened. I felt a sense of liberation, a peace that I hadn't experienced in years. Sophia sat in stunned silence. She had never imagined Don Anselo would share such an intimate part of his journey, yet she felt grateful. His words were the balm she had needed. The gift of self-care, embracing intimacy at any age. As Don Anselo continued, his voice grew gentler, more reflective. It wasn't just about the physical pleasure, Sophia. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that I thought had been lost forever. That moment, that act of self-care, became a way of nurturing myself. I began to view it as an act of kindness, a way to connect with my body in a manner that was respectful and loving. He let his words sink in before continuing, and do you know what else happened? Over time, I noticed something profound. It helped me manage the stress and anxiety that had been building up inside me. I slept better at night. The restless thoughts that once kept me awake disappeared. Masturbation, Sophia, became a practice of self-acceptance. It helped me see my aging body not with disdain, but with gratitude. I stopped looking at my wrinkles, my stiffness, my slower pace, as signs of weakness. I saw them for what they were, marks of a life well lived. Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had never considered that an act so personal, so private, could hold so much power. She felt the heaviness in her heart lift, replaced by a new sense of understanding, a deep appreciation for Don Anselo's honesty. It taught me to love myself in ways I hadn't known I could, Sophia, Don Anselo added, his voice thick with emotion. It was about reconnecting, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. It was about allowing myself to feel joy, comfort, and relief. It was about treating myself with the same compassion I would show to a dear friend. Sophia, overcome by emotion, whispered, "Thank you, Don Ancelo. Your story. It gives me hope. I never expected to feel this way at my age, but hearing you speak so openly, I realize now that I don't have to feel ashamed. I can embrace this part of myself without guilt." With a warm and knowing smile, Don Ancelo placed his hand gently on hers. "There's no shame, my dear friend. No shame in seeking pleasure, in caring for yourself. We all deserve it. Our bodies may change, but our right to love ourselves never does." The road ahead, embracing self-love and acceptance. As the two sat in the plaza, the world around them seemed to pause. The conversation between them was more than just a sharing of words. It was an exchange of life lessons. Sophia, once burdened by shame and uncertainty, now felt a sense of freedom she hadn't realized she was missing. She wasn't an aging woman questioning her worth. She was a woman discovering new depths of self-love and self-compassion. "I promise you, Don Ancelo," she said softly, "I will embrace this lesson. I will no longer deny my desires, nor will I feel ashamed of my body's needs. I will honor myself, just as you have taught me." Don Ancelo smiled warmly, his heart full of contentment. "That is the beauty of living, Sophia. The journey of self-acceptance and self-love never truly ends. And as you move forward, remember this: your age doesn't define your worth. Your body, your desires, your needs, they are always worthy of love." And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the village, Sophia felt a renewed sense of hope. With Don Ancelo's words resonating in her heart, she knew that this conversation had marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with love, self-compassion, and the unwavering belief that it was never too late to embrace the beauty of intimacy, no matter how many years had passed. A new perspective on aging, intimacy, and self-care. This profound conversation between Don Ancelo and Sophia serves as a reminder to us all. Intimacy, sexuality, and self-love are not confined to a particular age. In fact, as we age, we should embrace these aspects of our lives with even more fervor, understanding, and respect for ourselves. The need for love, connection, and pleasure is not something that disappears with age. It is something that grows and transforms, offering new avenues of self-exploration and self-acceptance. Sophia's journey is a powerful testament to the transformative power of self-compassion. Through the wisdom of Don Ancelo, she learned that the road to self-acceptance is not linear, but it is always worth walking. It is a road filled with discovery, understanding, and the quiet, empowering realization that we are deserving of love and pleasure at every stage of life.